Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Off Script with Pastor Jared. I'm here with our very first long distance guest. I wonder if you can guess who it is. You probably can because you read the caption before you clicked the episode, but it is Austin McKnight, my dear friend. How's it going, Austin?
It's going great.
A former Kirby Woods intern. Maybe that's your greatest accolade. Give the folks a little update on your life. What's been going on the last few years since, I guess, Colorado and then to today.
So in 2018, we moved back to South Carolina, and I started pastoring Central First Baptist Church. I have 3 kids, Annie, Judah, and Violet. I also co-own a landscape business called Southern Scapes, where we manage a bunch of properties. And so I stay pretty busy with all those things.
You don't have any high profile grass that you cut, do you?
I do have a few Clemson coaches that we take care of, but as many people listen to this, I hate to throw out their names.
Of course, it's in poor taste to name drop, so we won't do that.
Right.
But so we could talk about 1,000 things. We could go back and do a Colorado rehash. We could do a Kirby Woods intern rehash. We could just sling the hash. We could do anything we wanted to do. But the reason I had you on today was because you have, I think, a unique ability to read a lot of books. And you've always been a better volume reader than me. And it's one of the few things I admire about you. So I wanted, I wanted to have you on to talk about it because I think it got relevant for our church last week because we did a digital detox media fast and kind of got away from the screens. And a lot more people were reading in the last week than they normally were, myself included. I read 1 book over the course of last week. I know that's light work for the master. So I wanted to have you on to talk about just reading in general, the value of reading, your approach to reading. I know it's something that's important to you, and usually you're going through a lot of books. How many books do you try to read in a year?
I really don't set a goal except maybe to try to beat last year. I just try to read at a pace where I get the information out of the book and get to, if it's fiction, I enjoy the book. But I try to read maybe 75 to 100 books a year.
That's a lot of books, my man. That's pretty good. I mean, are there people in your life that read more than you do? Or are you pretty much in every conversation the top reader?
I usually don't start conversations off like that, But,
it's not like, hey brother, what you running? It's not.
yeah, that's right. But I probably read as much or more than most. But I do think I have a unique situation that gives me the time to do that. And I can talk more about that in a little bit.
So, all right, first question is why? Why do you try to keep a reading schedule that is more than just casual? I mean, I would say to read 70 plus books a year, you have to want to. You have to make time for it. It has to be important to you. So why are you doing that, and what are some of the benefits that brings to you?
I think reading is a discipline, like a lot of things. It's kind of like going to the gym. If you want to discipline your body, you have to exercise even when you don't want to. So it's a discipline, but reading is more for your mind. And seminary really gave us that discipline, I think, where they taught us the value of reading and kind of developed the habit of reading. And even after seminary, one book that I read was Conviction to Lead by Al Mohler. And he talked about the importance, especially for a pastor, to read. I also think that books are timeless, where movies are outdated, and they're constantly remaking movies, even ones that I had in my childhood. They're just every 20 years they remake them, where books really outlast. I mean, they last forever. And I think also it broadens my knowledge on a variety of subjects. So, I get into all kinds of different hobbies, and I'll think, well, I should read a book about that, and it helps me. Even like historical books. I recently read a book called The Pioneers by David McCullough, and it was really interesting about how we spread to the West. I read a book by Phil Knight, the founder of Nike Shoe Dog, and I was so impressed and interested in that book. I've been into running and hunting and all kinds of things like that. And usually when I get into a hobby, it just helps me to read about it. And I think that books are more like, vegetables, where media and television is kind of like junk food, where they're just overall probably better for you.
Well, I found even in this media fast last week, as you take some time off of the screens, you feel the same kind of withdrawals as like when you take time off of caffeine or off of sugar, to go with your metaphor. Like your body's is almost screaming for it. Like, give me TV, please. I need to get back on social media. And I would imagine with books, it's different, completely different experience with books, that it doesn't have that same addictive effect on your mind.
Right.
So why do you think more people aren't reading more? What do you think is the main reason that your average person is not? I don't think the average person is going to read 70 books a year, or to kind of follow exactly what you're doing. But there's always, you see a statistic every once in a while that comes out that shocks you. That's like, there's a huge percentage, I don't know the number, but there's a huge percentage of people that once they graduate their last level of schooling, read 0 more books for the rest of their life. So
right.
Why do you think that is for most people, that they're just not reading at all?
I would say probably the number one reason is time. Whether it's a job or raising kids or doctor's appointments or church activities, it's just hard to find the time to sit down and read a book. Or while you're reading a book, you think about all the other things that you should be doing. But I found that there's a lot of periods each day when, as I'm sure you learned last week with the media fast, where if I wasn't scrolling through Twitter or Instagram, I actually do have a lot more time than I think,
right,
that I could read or listen to a book. Maybe another reason is they just never, reading was always a discipline more than something that they enjoyed. Because, a lot of times, like classics that we read in elementary school and high school, they're good for our education, but they're really not that entertaining or helpful. And so probably a solution to that is, as I mentioned, just find something that you're passionate about or interested in and read a book about that.
So you think reading is just a net good, that you should encourage people to read, even if it's just read what you like?
Yeah. You don't have to read The Institutes by John Calvin, necessarily. Maybe
War and Peace, Leo Tolstoy, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. But find something that, at least start with the easy stuff, and then you can move on to the more difficult stuff. And maybe one more reason is just, it's really just not flashy to be a reader, especially fiction, because you're not going to get a lot of likes, on a post about some book that you read. But I have found that fiction really kind of transplants you into a different world. And there's a deeper level of entertainment than even a movie or especially social media that those things can offer in fiction books.
Well, I want to go down that, chase that rabbit for a second, because when I talk to people, especially in the Christian world, I think there's a barrier to fiction that's almost unique, where people will say, like, I don't read fiction because that's a waste of time. You might have people say, I'll read like a how-to book, or I'll read a self-help book, or even Christians will say, I'll read a Christian book, whatever the most popular Christian book at the time, because they have some perceived value that it's going to add to their life. But you will find a lot of people say, man, fiction is just, I can't get over the fact that it feels like wasted time. I should be doing something else. How would you respond to that kind of person? Would you actually encourage people push through that and get into fiction?
I read a lot of fiction. I do think there's a lot of value in fiction books. Now, I would say part of the discipline that I have to force myself is, like, I can't just read fiction. I try to read things that are helpful, maybe as, like parenting or pastoral ministry or books on scripture, Christian living. But just my natural habit is to read fiction. But the value, I think, in fiction is that, one, it introduces major themes. In almost every fiction book, you'll find themes like justice, truth, religion, evil, morality. And these themes give you a wider view, not just what Christians think, but on what the world thinks on those subjects. And I've found that helpful in sermons, or a lot of pastors that I listen to will quote even like Shakespeare or other people, and it gives you a wider worldview, I think. Actually, like right now I'm preaching through Jude, and Jude quotes the book of Enoch, which is in the Apocrypha, but it says that he was aware of what the people that he's writing to, what they were reading, and he uses that to appeal to them. Or like Paul at Athens, he says, some of your poets have said,
the Cretan poets.
That's right. That he's aware of what that poetry was and uses that to make his point. And I think that fiction writing in general just keeps your mind sharp, and it helps you see kind of just the beauty of books, just some of the common grace, that we all enjoy, the just so many things that you find in fiction books.
It's interesting to me that when I hear that rebuttal that people say, fiction's a waste of time, I hear that all the time, but that same person often is watching an incredible amount of fiction TV or fiction movies. So
right.
Why do you think the book gets a bad rap as wasted time when movies are not considered? Like if you watched a Marvel movie, nobody would say, man, what an incredible waste of time. You would just say, hey, that was 2 hours of entertainment.
That's right. Yeah, and even in those movies, you see some of those themes that I was talking about, that you walk away and say, why did I like that? And those same themes can be found in books, and are usually, a book, you're invested so much time in a book, opposed to a 2 or 3 hour movie. You may have 10 hours in a book.
Right.
You're just so much more invested in the characters and the story.
Well, one thing I've been thinking about is that it's our brains have kind of been retrained through modern media, the way that we've taken media now. our brains have actually been rerouted and changed. The way, dopamine is released and serotonin and all these things, our brain pathways, our attention spans are dramatically shorter because of the way we take in media. So, there used to be a time when people would not think of anything, crazy to sit down and listen to a radio show for hours and hours, or, they would spend time reading long books. People used to read a lot more, and only recently has that flipped. I think because when you take in, the average person is just swiping their thumb and they're taking in 10-second TikTok videos or 10-second YouTube shorts. And it's just like, you watch a minute of this video, then you click on the side, you got recommended videos, 10 other ones, and you just click, 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 click. You do that day after day after day, and that trains your brain to not even be able to take in long form content at all. So you're bored by the time you're on page 10 of a book. You're bored because it's just like, where's the button? Where's the button to do the next thing? And it's like, no, man, you got 300 pages to go down this story. I just think that's where most people are, especially young people who their minds have been TikToked, or everything is Insta culture. So to me, that's what I notice a lot too. I'm sure you see the same thing.
Yeah, give me the slow roasted barbecue, not the hot pocket,
Low and slow, 13 hours. Yeah.
That's my nickname, is Low and Slow. So.
I always tell people, like, when I make jokes, about you, I'll say, like, he may not be good at this, and I'll list off, something, but team sports, basketball, but anything involving, and this is sports, but it's also your personality, anything involving just getting in there and doing it for a long time, not complaining, and just like finishing the task is definitely your personality. It's your gift, your skill set. And I think that serves you in reading, and also like your other interests. I know you've been a bicycle rider. You can go way beyond when my legs are tired. You keep going, chugging up the hill. So all that's connected, but I think that's actually really countercultural today, where most things that we're doing are next thing. All right, I'm bored. That's where most people are.
Right.
So how would you, if you had to encourage people or give tips, or I guess the modern word would be hacks, any reading hacks that you could give to people to say, if you're struggling, here's a couple tips from you.
Sure. Now, these are copyrighted, so I'll send you the bill for these. But
of course.
I think a few things that I've learned that help me are, in December or January, when you're making your New Year's resolution, to always decide maybe a goal that you would like to read. And it's kind of like if you want to start praying each day, well, you probably don't want to say, I'm going to set aside an hour each day to pray.
Right.
It's like, well, maybe start with 5 minutes a day and then build up. And so maybe next year you say, I want to read, well, set a goal to read like a book a month. And I think it would help to accomplish that if you set a goal to do it. And another thing that I do is I keep track of what I read. So on my phone, that little notes app, I just put 2023 reading. And every time I read a book, I write it down. And it's kind of you look back and say, wow, I'm 30 books in or whatever. And it's an encouragement to see your progress and what you've done. And that's been helpful for me.
It is like a trophy almost. I mean, even books that you keep. Jerry Seinfeld has a stand-up bit about books that really have no value once you've read them, if you never read them again, but yet we keep them and we kind of display them because books are trophies. It's like, I read that. I'm proud that I read that. So I think that's true.
Yeah. Probably the way that I really started reading more too is I read before I go to bed at night, instead of, and I still do this some, but instead of rolling over on my phone and scrolling through social media, I found that I actually sleep better if I read a book until I just can't keep my eyes open. Then I'll lay the book down and I'll usually sleep better through the night.
No blue light keeping you up, right?
That's right. Now we don't have electricity, so I have to read by candlelight.
Of course. Is that all of South Carolina, or is that just your neighborhood?
It's all of South Carolina. Yeah, it's a miracle that I can complete this podcast.
I know. How do you even have internet right now?
I know. It's just amazing.
All right, go ahead. This is not going to end well.
Another hack is probably read beyond the first chapter. When you read a fiction book, it takes time to build the story. Chapter 1 is like all these characters and the setting, and they're trying to lay the foundation. And sometimes you read the first chapter of a book and you finish it and you think, I have no idea what has happened. I've given 2 hours to this and I don't know. I would say, read it again and give the author some time to get to the point. And, some authors are better than others at doing that. And usually the ones that are the best are the ones that we read the most. But I think you have to give the author the chance.
But we do that with movies, to be fair.
That's right.
We give movies a chance. How many times have you been in a movie in the first 20 minutes? You're like, where is this going?
That's right.
But eventually they usually get there.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, if you watch Willy Wonka, the first part, you're like, what is this?
Where's Willy?
I don't want to fall into a chocolate river.
Yeah, you think it's about the Slugworth candy company or whatever it is.
That's right.
Where it's but you're right. I mean, every movie usually takes a turn after they get going.
Yeah. Yeah. And probably the biggest hack that has moved me from 10 books a year or 20 to many more is audiobooks or ebooks, which is just a copy of a book like on your phone or a Kindle, and replacing time with social media. Like, for example, you go to the doctor's office or the dentist office, you're sitting out in the lobby, you can either waste 45 minutes probably waiting, doing absolutely nothing by looking at Facebook, or you could have a book on your phone and you've really kind of accomplished something if you take advantage of that time. And so I do use audiobooks a lot. Specifically, I was originally buying audiobooks, and kind of like you were saying with Seinfeld, I started thinking, man, I'm listening to these things and I'm probably not going to listen to them again. And they're like $16 a piece. So I finally found that Libby app, which I think your church uses, and you can download it for free, and you just input your library card information. You can actually check out books from your local library. And so that has helped me tremendously to read a lot of books.
What tablet are you reading on?
I have a Kindle, and then I just have the Kindle app on my phone too. And so I'll either read through Apple Books or Kindle, the hard copy, or I use that Libby app to listen.
So you're not doing like audio or Audible through Amazon?
I've tried Audible, and the system was just, I was paying the $10 a month or whatever it is, and the selection, to get like the bestseller books, you still have to pay. I think you get like one free one a month or something. But I mean, our Clemson library, there's some things we don't have, but through that Libby app, I've listened to a lot of books.
So you're not anti audio, anti tablet readers. It's for you. It's kind of a whatever gets you reading, do it.
That's right. Yeah, whatever the medium to reading is, I don't think really matters as long as you're reading. Now, I think there's a challenge with audiobooks you have to be able to focus. And so that's probably the last hack that I could think of is, with an audiobook, you can listen to it while you're driving. And the reason that I listen to so many books is if I'm cutting grass or working outside, I listen to an audiobook. And so, you can clip away at some books if you're working 6 hours a day, outside or something. You can really go through a lot of books.
And you feel like you're actually remembering them and taking them in?
Yeah. I mean, some more than others. Like we were talking about, some books are just hard to get into. And I've finished an audiobook and thought, that was 6 hours, and I really couldn't tell you the main character's name. But I would say like 90% of the time, I really get the story. And, when they're free, I've listened to audiobooks multiple times, like the same book even.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's finish with a fun little question to round it out and maybe get some people excited about reading. What are the top 3 non-biblical, so no church answers allowed on that, your top 3 books of all time that you've ever read and you enjoy? Go from 3 to 1 and just a brief word of why you like them.
All right. Number 3, probably Cat in the Hat. You just set me up too well. I had to. Dr. Seuss, the author.
Theodore Seussel.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, probably number 3, and this may be a curveball, but The Stand by Stephen King. And I'll just say this about each of these books. Like, I've listened to that book twice, and it's like a 24-hour audiobook. But the reason that I like each of these books is because they're really epic stories. They're very long. There's a real investment in the characters. And I like a book when you read it, you're really when you're done, you're disappointed. I hope the author writes another book about that, or I would like to know how that character finishes their life or whatever. And so I like a real investment in time in a book when you can really get into it. So, and I think you have to have a little bit of wisdom. Just like I don't watch a lot of movies because as a Christian, there's things in there that I shouldn't watch. And I think there's things in books some books we should say, I shouldn't read that. And so Stephen King, I really like him, but he pushes it on the morality scale. But his books are so well written, and the way he develops the plot. And I've listened to a lot of his stuff, but that book is a really good one, The Stand.
Okay. What about number 2?
Number 2 is Harry Potter. And
wow. All 9 of them?
Yeah, all of them. I mean, and I could say that it's not, but I've read that book. I basically read that series every year. That's kind of my nighttime before I go to bed. I'll just read through them, and then in January, basically just start over. But I just think they're so well written, and the story is so good. And everybody likes different books too. Just because it's mine doesn't mean it's the best. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't probably number two.
All right.
You could probably guess number one.
If Harry was two, I know what number one is, but
Yeah.
it's still, I want to hear you say it.
Yeah, it's Lord of the Rings.
Of course.
By Tolkien. And that's another one that I probably read it every other year, but I read it again last year, those three books. And I just think, especially as a Christian, it has a lot more good biblical themes in it, but I just go back to it again and again. And usually, a lot of times too, with those last two, with Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, I'll read them and I'll read a book, watch the movie, then I'll read the next book, watch that movie. And I just think there's such good books.
So will you consent to a future podcast where we go through it and discuss the Christian themes found therein in the Lord of the Rings?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I knew I could count on you for that one.
Oh yeah, I'd be glad to. Yeah, talk about how Gollum is a Judas,
And you'll give us your impression of Gollum, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure.
We'll have a Gollum off, but we can both go and see who does the better one.
That's right. Yeah. And your podcast will be over after that.
Yeah, that's it. We'll get pulled. Well, any final thoughts on that? You just wrap a bow on it about if somebody's sitting there, and they're reading 0 books a year. Anything you would say to them?
I'd say just give it a try. Just find something that you like to read, a subject that interests you, or a book. I mean, I usually just look at what are some of the top selling books right now. What are popular, and they're usually popular because they're pretty good.
Yeah.
And just try one of those books, and don't bite off more than you can chew, but give it a shot and try to put down social media or your phone a little bit. And I think there's a lot more value and reward for books than what we get from media.
And if all else fails, and you can't get excited about anything, pick up The Cat in the Hat. And it's pretty good too.
Or the places you'll go.
That's right. Which, when you have little kids, you actually end up reading a lot of those books over and over again. I'm more reading now than I usually have been because all the books I'm reading to my kids.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, it's been fun, man. We will have you back as long as the ratings and downloads are high. We'll have you back again, and so many stories that we could go over of your storied life that we could talk about together.
Yes, too many times when funny things have happened, I knew not to even bring anything up. We would derail the whole podcast. So.
Yeah, that's right. We we have a healthy respect for one another because we both have stories that we could tell on each other. So
that's right.
We'll just keep it right down the middle.
That's right.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening today. This podcast on reading, the value to encourage you to get more into reading, and hope it was encouraging to you. And again, if you are in the Memphis area looking for a church, we'd love to see you at Kirby Woods Baptist Church. And if you're in the central area, Austin, where would you tell them to go?
Central First Baptist Church.
That's right.
We'd love to have you.
Well, thank you guys. Have a wonderful week. See you later. God bless.